What is going on, everybody? I'm your boy Retro Bliss, and you're on Retro Bliss. You're on actually Retro Bliss Rewind. I'm used to saying Retro Bliss Gaming because I live stream every day. But anyway, we have a very exciting show tonight. We're going to be talking about the SEGA Dreamcast. I actually don't have one yet. I want to get one really bad. But man, actually getting a Dreamcast isn't all that hard. But man, the games. But we're going to talk about that. But before we do get into that, I'm just going to bring on the panel because these guys are more experts on the Dreamcast than I am. So here's Mike from Mike's Gaming Gala, Brian from BD Retro Mods, and without, last but not least, it would be Mr. Postile himself. What's going on, fellas?
Hey.
How's it going?
So, before we get into it, these guys kind of know what's going on. And for those of you who are regular viewers of this channel, which by the way, if you're watching from Mike's Gaming Gala, this is being simulcast over on Mike's channel. Welcome for all of you guys over there as well. So, but anyway, I got me a little something today that I wanted to share. I've wanted to get this console for a while, and I found this deal on Facebook Marketplace. I bought me an Odyssey 2 complete in box with 4 complete in box games, and this thing was by the original owner, and he had kept it in his box for a lot of years, stored in like a dry place. It just everything looks really good. It had like all the none of the books are wrinkled. Everything it looks like the books are like you just open the package, and I got everything for $100. And I usually try to negotiate down, but when I got there and I saw what I was getting, I decided not to do that. I thought better of it because I did not want to insult him or his wife was there as well, but that was not the reason. I don't mind negotiating, but in this case I thought I was getting a good deal, so I thought I would kind of share that anyway. I thought that was nice. Something that I would want to share. But anyway, all right, so what I'd like to do is I know that most of you may know what a SEGA Dreamcast is, but many of you may not know what a SEGA Dreamcast is. Mike, do you have one handy there that you can show everybody?
Oh, I might.
Okay, yeah. It's a SEGA Dreamcast. It's got a little door on the top there where you put a
GD-ROM, not a CD-ROM.
It's not a CD-ROM.
It's a GD-ROM.
I was corrected pre-show about that. I didn't even know. But yeah, and that one's in very good shape.
What's that right there, Brian?
That is a phone modem.
Ooh.
Wow.
This really is the gaming system for the new century.
Yeah. So anyway.
Although not the last major system to be released in the 20th century, because of course, as all our educated guests here know, 2000 was the last year of the 20th century. And the PlayStation 2 came out in 2000. This came out in North America, 9/9/99, September 9th, 1999.
Yes.
But I will say, though, that the Dreamcast was the first to do that, though, for online play, to actually come
correct.
To come with the console. So.
And also the last major console to come out in the 90s. You can say that.
Yes.
Okay, so what we're going to do now that we know what it looks like, and it was made by SEGA. Brian's going to talk a little bit about the history of it, and we're going to hear a little bit about it. So take it away, Brian.
Yeah, I'm just going to kind of hit on some key points about it. Is this ultimately, as you may or may not know, the previous console from SEGA was the Sega Saturn. And unfortunately, there was a lot of mistakes made, especially in the North American launch of it, that really put a sour taste in not just consumers' mouths, but developers as well. And Sega would then decide to start developing the Dreamcast in 1997. learning from those mistakes that they did with the Sega Saturn. Because again, Sega Saturn did fairly well in Japan, but it did not really do well anywhere else. Was just learning from those mistakes, because one of the complaints was it was very hard to program for the Saturn. So the Dreamcast, which if you'll notice on the front of the console, you'll see that it says compatible with Windows CE.
Windows CE.
So again, the console had a custom version of Windows CE built into it, and the reason for that was so that developers could easily port PC games at the time over to the console. Additionally, the technology in the Dreamcast was very near identical to Sega's Naomi board. And because of that, that also allowed for easy programming to have nearly identical conversions of arcade games that used that board. The Dreamcast itself would release in Japan in November 27th of 1998. Again, Sega learned from their mistakes with the Saturn. Like, hey, don't just drop this thing out of the blue. You only give people a couple days to say it's coming out, with no games, or literally no games for it. So again, they held off for North America, and many of us growing up at the time definitely remember the ads, because again, there was such a large marketing campaign for the Dreamcast, and again, it was going off of that $99.99 release. I mean, you just had everything $99.99, and like I said, growing up during that, it was fun to see that, because like I said, the advertising definitely worked. I mean, I've always been a Sega fan, but man, I was so excited for the Dreamcast.
And it worked so much better, like, because it was promoting. Now, I do like the Sega Saturn, and that
and I do too.
Saturn, the Sega Saturn ads are ingrained in my mind. Was like Sega Saturn, right?
Mm-hmm.
But there was just something
and like
about
the weird bald guy with it.
Yeah, the weird bald guy. But I remember being, because I was graduating high school around this time, and and all that. I remember the Saturn ads for me kind of bleeding into the Dreamcast ads.
Right.
And so it wasn't until it was before launch that I found out, oh, it's actually a new system. But at the start of that ad campaign, I remember thinking, oh, are these like Saturn? Just thinking they were more Saturn ads, because they had that same kind of edgy feel.
Right. I mean, it was just, like I said, the lineup. There would be 19 games available at launch, and this is my own personal opinion. To this day, I still feel it was probably one of the best launch libraries we ever seen for a console release, for a new console.
And yet, it still couldn't save it from the PS2 a year later.
No, and it couldn't, because again, I mean, there was 19 titles at launch. And I'm not going to name off all 19, but like just the powerhouses in it were just insane. I mean, you had Soul Calibur, which was an arcade perfect port. You had Power Stone, that was an arcade perfect port. You had Mortal Kombat Gold, which was, pretty much giving you the best of all the multiple Mortal Kombat games to date as a, encompassing package. It was amazing. And again, arcade perfect. Sonic Adventure, I mean, Hydro Thunder, arcade perfect port, and House of the Dead 2, and NFL.
Oh, I didn't pull that one out.
NFL Blitz 2000, Ready to Rumble Boxing. I mean, there's just so many arcade ports day one that were just, like I said, nearly identical.
This wasn't a day one, was it?
No, it wasn't.
No, okay. It's an awesome arcade perfect port.
Yes. I mean, but again, it's just that was the selling point of the Dreamcast, right? Because the thing was, like, the PlayStation was good. Don't get me wrong. The PlayStation and Saturn were good consoles, but they still struggled during their period to get arcade perfect ports. And this was finally the first kind of console to say, well, no, because you had the Neo Geo that no one could afford. But taking the Neo Geo out of the equation, this was the first affordable arcade.
Okay, let's put it this way: 3D arcade perfect.
Yes. So, but again, I mean, to this day, I would still argue it was the best launch any home console has ever had. And again, again, this was the first time I finally had disposable income, and you know, kind of didn't, because going to college, but I still saved, like, well, because again, getting it announced so early in Japan, it's like, yep, I'm going to start saving now, sell off some stuff I don't want anymore, get enough money for it. I mean, I myself personally, I bought the console at launch, and I literally think I had 8 of those games pre-ordered for the launch, just because there's so many arcade ports that I just remember dumping so much money into, that I was just so excited to be able to have them for home play. But then with that, to Mike's point, even though it had a great launch at the start, a bunch of good games coming out, there was just multiple things that would, as it continued on, that it would not slowly, because it didn't really have a long lifespan in the grand scheme of things, but after that initial release, it would start to die out. And the reason for that was just really 3 big points. You know, looking online, like different history articles on it, is just obviously consumer confidence. Because you got to remember, like, Sega made a number of mistakes. Like, you had the Genesis, which everyone freaking loved, you know, and it was the top. You know, when you look at the console wars, I mean, it was constantly going back and forth between that and Super Nintendo. Sega CD, people really enjoyed that. They didn't have an issue with that. But then they rushed the 32X, and like, that was supposed to make a longer lifespan for your Genesis, right? Well, you know, it wasn't until how many months later, oh, hey, here's the Sega Saturn now, guys. And then again, folks that spent the kind of money they did on a Sega Saturn, again, not a terrible system, but it just didn't have the games, and it had a high cost point compared to PlayStation.
Saturn was a 2D powerhouse.
Yes.
Yeah.
But then, so like I said, you know, seeing what happened with the Saturn, now people are like, do I really want to jump into another Sega console? Because again, Sony had such a good foothold with the with the original PlayStation at that point. And then again,
and
now
we will.
Oh, go ahead.
I know it's got people that love it, but we will get to maybe it's Achilles' heel.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes. But
just
then,
looking at it makes my hands hurt.
Yeah, but like I said, the consumer confidence with Sega just was not there, and it's a shame, because it was such an amazing console, and I think everyone here would agree. I mean, you saw some of the best work come from Sega on this thing. I mean, they were not afraid to take chances. Like, you saw some crazy games that were just.
This was the origin of like Jet Set Radio, stuff like games like that.
Amigo, you know.
Yeah, we're just like weird.
C-Man.
And it's something that, but it's something that, like, a lot of people consider the original Xbox to be basically the successor of the Dreamcast.
Yeah.
And I would agree with that in many ways, not the least of which you kind of touched on. This, for all intents and purposes at the time, was a gaming PC with proprietary software.
Mm-hmm.
And what happened very shortly after that with the Xbox and then the PS3 and the 360 and all that, modern consoles are really just gaming PCs with proprietary software. And this was the first one to really be that.
Yep. And then, so like I said, consumer confidence just really wasn't there. But then the other one, which to me personally, I didn't really care, but especially during this time, Electronic Arts was huge. And Electronic Arts, because of the sour taste they had in their mouth with the Sega Saturn, with the low sales that they had, ultimately decided, we're not supporting the Dreamcast. We're not going to make any of our games on the Dreamcast. And like, for me, that wasn't a big deal, because I wasn't really into those like sport games and stuff from them. But during that time period, that was kind of a nail in a coffin. You know, if EA is not bringing out the latest Madden to your console, you're in trouble, you know, and that's kind of what hit them at that time. And then there were some other developers too that were just solely, you know, Sony at that point too. But But then obviously just the news of the PlayStation 2 coming, because again, it wasn't that much longer after the Dreamcast came out that, hey guys, we're making a PlayStation 2 and it's going to be able to play DVDs. And
that was a big set, and it's going to be cheaper.
And it's right. So at the end of the day, kind of like how the PlayStation 3 with Blu-ray, PlayStation 2 with DVD, because DVD just wasn't big in the household yet. So for a lot of people, that was their entry DVD player. And
I'm one of them.
Right. And it's just that just completely, just at the end of the day, there was just too much popularity and momentum there with the DVD capabilities of the PlayStation, plus the popularity of the original PlayStation.
The original PlayStation was huge.
Right. And they just couldn't compete with it. And with that, sadly, we would see the discontinuation of the Dreamcast officially happen worldwide March 31st of 2001. So again, for North America, it made it.
Didn't even last 2 years.
Didn't even make it.
At least in North America.
Right. Again, numbers seem to be a little off. So this is approximate. Don't hold me to them, but approximately. Yeah, I know. Approximately. So what I seemed to come up with was approximately 248 games were released in North America for the console. The total number worldwide was around 600. And
I know there were a lot of Japanese titles.
And
I didn't know there was that many. That's pretty good for the lifespan of the console.
Yeah.
Right. And the last game that would actually be released in North America was in the middle of 2002, and that was NHL 2K2. That was the last North American released game. So, but again, and I'm sure everyone here is going to have stories, other than Phil, because Phil hasn't played a Dreamcast yet. But again,
he's played emulation.
One
of the great things,
I do emulate.
One of the great things about this platform being so heavily compatible with computers of the time is Dreamcast emulates really well. Try to emulate Nintendo 64; it's difficult. Dreamcast emulates really, really well.
Mm-hmm.
I use an emulator called Redream, by the way, for those of you on Windows. So go ahead.
Oh no, it's just like I said, growing up with it, I loved it. I love the fact that.
Wait! Just for Derek, it did.
Yeah,
well,
that's right. Namco Museum.
Yeah, but not
it had good
2600.
Pac-Man. Don't worry, Phil.
Yeah, and I don't think I pulled it, but. Yeah, my copy of Ms. Pac-Man Maze Madness, but yeah, I don't see it in my file here. So, but did it have Popeye?
Sorry, it didn't have Popeye.
But again, I like the fact that you can have 4 people playing on it. Because it had 4 controller ports already. But I think this is a good time to talk about one of the issues too, and that was the controller itself. Because as Mike held up. You can see that the design of it kind of
where's my other thumbstick? This is post DualShock controller. Come on, Sega.
Yeah, right. Well, again, it really was just like a modification.
This isn't great to play with either.
Yeah.
No.
Yeah, I've actually got a Saturn 3D controller right over here. If you give me a sec.
Yeah.
Nice.
But yeah, it really was a modification. Now again, it had the VMUs, which was in there, which was the memory card, but it could also be used on its own to actually do little Tamagotchi type things with certain games. So, yep, Poe's holding those up. But yeah, if you look, they really kind of took that, and that was the modification to it. But again,
and gave it less buttons.
Well, not really, because but you had the buttons up top. Well, yeah, I guess you did have.
You got triggers on the.
Yeah, you did. Yep. So,
but you've got a screen. Your VM gives you a screen.
Maybe you did, unless you got one of these knockoffs that came with mine that had just nothing but a memory card.
I was going to say this was one of my knockoffs because it held so much more. That's why it's so awful looking. Because it was
actually.
It's like
Dr. Volk's
4 of them.
Dr. Volk's comment is actually, so there's this big window, and your VMU, which is, for all intents and purposes, your memory card, plugs into your controller, and you can actually plug 2 in.
Mm-hmm.
And you can use this on its own. There was like even some like little Tamagotchi kind of games that you could have for it. But it plugs into your computer or your controller, and some games would actually show stuff on the screen. Not all of them, but some would.
Yeah, like
And some had little mini games built into the things too, where you could link them together and play with a friend.
Yeah,
It's kind of close quarters. You gotta hope they
You
brush
just
their teeth.
get really close and touch
Show
tips.
that again, Poe, please. Show that again on the screen. Okay.
Yeah, you just where am I at here?
Yeah, you can link them together, and yeah.
Okay.
When a boy VMU really likes a girl VMU.
But yeah, no, like because like Sonic Adventure had like a little Tamagotchi thing with like one of the little creature characters. I forget what they were called. Other games kind of used it for some little, but again, for the most part, it wasn't really utilized like I think they expected it to be. I mean, like a lot of the times you would just have the logo of the game on it. Like it wouldn't do anything more than that half the time, you know.
And there's some games where there's just nothing on it.
Right. So,
but you could link them together. If your buddy had one, you could put your save files on his this way, or like some of them you could play mini games together. So.
Yep. But again, like because again, the size of it I think was an issue. But the worst thing with
problem with the size, I mean, it's about the size, actually maybe a tiny bit smaller than the Duke for the Xbox. Mm-hmm. And it does feel good with the triggers. It just, with the plastic thumbstick and the lack of a second, it's just, it wasn't quite what it needed to be to really compete with, for instance, PlayStation.
Yeah, and again, the problem was just the fact that you had the analog triggers, like because of the fact that you didn't have 6 buttons, like you know, with the 3D controller from the Saturn that like Mike showed. That's where you ran into a problem, because one of the games that didn't make launch but came out like just like a week or two later was Marvel vs. Capcom. I mean, that game, in my opinion, was literally unplayable with the default controllers. Like, and with that, like, I literally had to.
It was like playing Street Fighter 2 with the original Genesis controllers, where you have to keep pressing select to switch. It's like, no.
Yeah, like I said, it just didn't work. And I don't know if I can share my screen a second, because I could not find it. I thought I could find it shortly before the show, but
if you hit present, I can bring you up.
Yeah, so I'll hit present, share my screen, and we will just show this picture. Okay. Yep. You guys see it?
Pretty.
Yeah. So this was like in Japan only. So I immediately imported one of these once. I tried a couple matches of Marvel vs. Capcom, and it did not work with the original Dreamcast controllers. Like Power Stone was great. Other games was fine. Like
Street Fighter is not going to work.
Right.
It's just not.
So again, this was a Japan exclusive, which I imported at the time. But again, that to me was like a necessity to be able to play a lot of those fighting games that were getting ported over. So
you were a lot more industrious than I was, because I had just started college in '99, and my friend in my dorm had a Dreamcast, and I just played his. I never owned one in its original lifespan.
Well, like I said, I was just so excited at the time, because like you, I was in college. You know, it would have been my second year in college, and but like I said, I was just so excited for it, because there were so many good games coming. Like, you know, because again, I wasted so many quarters playing Marvel vs. Capcom and other games where I'm just like, I gotta get them, and it was just like, crap. This controller, again, as much as I love this system, you know, this controller definitely was an Achilles heel at times. Now, some people love this thing, but
I said, it is not terrible, but it is an Achilles heel for this era of gaming to only have one thumbstick.
Right. And then the other thing, which, you know, this one's minor, but at the same time not, which I think is a downfall, is the cord was on the bottom of the controller. I mean, and the thing is like if you look, there's like a little groove to where they expected you to do was take the controller up, press it into the groove, so that way then it was going the direction you were accustomed to. So I mean that was kind of goofy, having it on the bottom like that. But but again, overall though, I mean it worked, but again it did limit itself at the same time. So because like I say, if we had that second analog stick, I think they could have done a lot more with certain games. Because again, PlayStation already had a dual one at that point. So
yeah, and just of little note, they kind of took a memo from Nintendo with their connectors. They're very, very similar kind of connector to maybe like the GameCube or even the N64.
Yep. But so yeah, do we want to kind of talk about some other controllers for it while we're talking controllers? Or
yeah, why don't we move on to controllers? Because I know mine is in a box somewhere, but you brought my favorite Dreamcast controller.
Yeah. So again, I didn't bring them all. I missed a couple. But again, there was light guns for it because obviously House of the Dead 2. That's the only play. I mean, you could play with the control. At the end of the day, you gotta play with a light gun. And but then on top of that, one of the favorites for me is the fishing controller. So like,
hold on, I got yep.
So, yeah. So now this was the third party one because at the time, again, cutting corners, I went with the third party controller because this was my original one I bought when Sega Bass Fishing came out. So so again, I went with the third party instead of the official because it was half the price at the time. But but again, it's great. And I mean,
live in the Midwest, you're gonna have to have a fishing rod.
But
Bass Pro never played so good.
Oh yeah. But again, and they had arcade sticks, which I never actually had any of the arcade sticks because I said I had that fighting controller. I never did get around to an arcade stick because again, as much as I love arcade sticks, I never had one for the Dreamcast. And I'll be honest, I'm not sure why I never did because I usually had one for every other console. But again, I was content with the 6-button fighting pad. Obviously, the original controllers, light gun, fishing controller. I don't have it, but I used to own one. As I did have a Dreamcast keyboard. Because again, as we showed,
mouse and keyboard,
because again, right out of the gate, you had the ability, good old 56K modem back there, to be able to, dial in. There would eventually, which again, they were very rare and expensive now. But again, I used to own one. Later on, they did make a broadband adapter. So you just literally pull the current modem out, and then you can pop the broadband adapter in. Yep. And you were good to go.
And also of note, you could have an SVG out.
Yeah.
For your monitors. So this could literally hook up to your computer monitor. You plug a mouse and keyboard in. Yeah. And you're playing Unreal or whatever online.
Well, and you did because again, and that was part of having the Windows CE stuff because again, they had a version of Unreal Tournament. They had a version of Quake. They had a lot of good stuff. And again, obviously, I don't want to spoil any of our stuff when we talk about games, but someone already mentioned in the chat, good God, I put so many hours in the Phantasy Star Online. I don't even, I put in hundreds of hours. And again, somewhere in my pile of stuff, I have, because there was different hacks you could do with the memory cards and stuff to make copies of all your gear and whole bunch of crap. I mean,
to Derek's comment here, everybody, and I know Dr. Volk, you're like, oh, I wasn't even born yet. Everybody had 56K modems. That was I remember when that was a quality, you had the top of the line stuff. I got a 56K modem.
Dude, I remember having an 8-baud modem.
Yeah, but you were born in the Stone Age.
For my 800 XL, I swear I had an 8-baud modem for my bulletin boards before there was actually an internet.
He had to dial into the internet.
Yep.
Well, but speaking of that, it was kind of the funny things because for a while, like all those little AOL free trials, and there was like some other free trial.
You would collect the discs and just use them like 3 months at a time.
Right, to be able to then plug your Dreamcast in and play. But yeah, so but yeah, I think those are pretty much the controllers. I can't think of anything else. But like again, just to show how much like I enjoyed the Dreamcast, because I was so sad when it was getting canceled, was that like I literally, when they announced, I mean, I went out and got myself an extra controller just in case, the ones I had would go bad. I mean, this has not been opened yet, so I literally bought this in 2001 and I have yet to open it. So,
which at the very least speaks to its durability.
Yes, correct.
You never needed your spare one,
right?
It also means we're really sorry. Brian didn't have friends growing up because nobody ever used that second controller.
Well, actually, now this is where you'll laugh, because all my extra controllers were actually those real crummy third-party ones.
Yeah, I was going to grab one.
That's what his friends played
Big.
with.
That's
they look
right.
like bags.
Because
I didn't want his friends playing with that one.
That's right, because I was okay if those ones broke, because playing in college,
I don't know what's worse, the idea of you not having friends or you being that guy that gave those, like, what were they, Intech controller? Like,
they were bad. There was not a single good third party. There was not a single good third party controller. I mean, you had the Nikos, you had
they were bad.
I think what's the company? So I think it's the same company. Yeah. Performance was the other company. Yeah, they were horrible, absolutely horrible. But they did get the job done for just a stupid night of playing, So
it also gave you a better advantage in head-to-head games.
I will admit, because I've got a lot of brothers. Whenever we play multiplayer on any system, you jockey for that one good controller that doesn't have the joystick drift or
Yep. That's hilarious.
So we talk about sorry, go ahead.
Oh no, I was just saying, did you have any experiences, Poe, with it when it first came out, or no?
No, when it came out, my biggest experiences with it were watching South Park, and Cartman kept coming up with plans to get a Sega Dreamcast. When it came out, I had 6 months left in the Air Force, so we were worried about where are we going to have money in 6 months when we get out. So I was still with my PlayStation 1 at the time that I absolutely loved, and then when I got home in 2000. We decided, I got a small job. We had my daughter. I didn't get another system until the original Xbox in 2001. So
I get that. Yeah.
AKA the Dreamcast 2.
You're right. And the only reason I picked that over PlayStation, because at that point I was a PlayStation fanboy, but the house that we bought was in the same town that my brother was renting a house a couple blocks up. And he had all kinds of money. He was single and had a really good job. He bought an Xbox instead of the PlayStation. So I knew whatever games he had, I could just walk up the road to his house and borrow. And that's what I did most of that generation, is play Xbox games. Mm-hmm. I didn't get my Dreamcast until I started collecting everything here about 8 years ago.
I had a PS2, but I remember getting, and this was probably in 2003, getting an original Xbox. Might have been 2002. And just, I loved the original Xbox. Like, just, it felt like power. It weighed like power.
Right.
But like Brian says, and even it was loud like the Dreamcast is. Like, it was the successor in almost every way. Massive controller, which they then came out with the ES controller. It was fun. Powerhouse, arcade perfect ports, online play, and of course a really loud disk drive. Mm-hmm. But it had the bonus that I really wish this had, which is internal memory that you would save all your stuff to.
And that was my
This-
first DVD player. Was my Xbox. So.
Yeah. So this thing, for those of you who don't know, I have never met a Dreamcast that is quiet. They have very loud disk drives.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Well, it's also the fan. The fan itself's real loud too.
Yeah.
I mean, you can do mods the quiet it, but
Yeah, and
but-
we'll get to we'll get to mods later.
right? But no, I mean, that
Really
was the
talk.
thing.
Yeah.
Yeah, because I said just last thing on the Xbox side, because like I said, I jokingly call it the Dreamcast 2, is just because not every game, but most Sega games were
A lot of the
exclusive.
franchises,
A lot of the franchise stuff was exclusive to the Xbox during that time.
like Jet Set Radio, like I
Yeah.
mentioned earlier.
Yeah.
At least for that generation.
Yes. So
We should probably talk some games.
yes, for sure. So how do you want to do it?
What do you-
Kind of go around the table, like keep.
You want to
taking
go around the
turns?
table?
It's fine.
I've got a mini stack here that I brought from my shelf. I didn't bring the South Park one. I'm sorry, Poe.
Oh, I had that on PC back in the day. I was playing that
It
online
was on
with dial-up.
everything. I've got Chef's Love Shack. I think
Yes.
is the one I've got.
Yeah, I got that one too. I think I got Rally also.
Okay, I'll just go through some of these and you can talk about them or not. But obviously, I mean, I grabbed this just because we're a retro channel and well, we're all retro channels, and you know, you gotta love some Namco Museum stuff. It's the same that was on the PlayStation. It's the same that was on the PS2. It was the same on everything. But
Namco milked that for every freaking penny they could
they
get.
and they still to
They
this day
still
do.
are.
I know they do.
Yeah.
I mean, the whole Namco Museum's like, hey,
It's on the
buy the same
Xbox
stuff
Series
for the
X.
10th time. Yeah.
These next two are my favorite Dreamcast games, bar none, because they were both games that I loved in the arcade. Crazy Taxi.
Yep. Yep.
I love Crazy Taxi, and it's a phenomenal version of it. And Hydro Thunder.
Oh yeah.
Hydro Thunder, like, so on the N64, I loved Wave Race. And then, you know, they came out with Wave Race 2 or whatever on the GameCube. Not nearly as good. Hydro Thunder was like, if you put steroids into Wave Race, because it had the wave physics and all that. Absolutely love this. Probably, I would argue, well, one of the most famous Dreamcast games, Sonic Adventure. Take Sonic into a 3D world. I was a big Sonic fan in like Sonic 1 and 2. This one, when I first played it, I was like, this isn't Sonic.
Yeah.
But I've learned to appreciate it more over time.
And to no shock, that was the highest selling Dreamcast game. Yeah.
Yeah.
So
Well, and it's because you have your franchise,
Oh,
your
right.
franchise characters. Soul Calibur, obviously.
Yeah.
I have never particularly liked tournament fighter games. Probably mostly because I suck at them and have always sucked at them. But obviously, the start of an incredibly popular franchise. Here's a kind of a famous one. Mine is sealed because I got the recent VR limited run edition, but Space Channel 5. It's a rhythm dancing game. It's really quirky. This is one of those
very
games
weird.
that Brian was talking about where they were experimenting, trying, and this is a complete cult classic.
Yeah.
I did not grab that one out because it's been on like every system, but Simpsons Road Rage is a great game too. And this one is on the N64, and that's where I played it. But Star Wars Episode Run Racer, it is probably the only good thing to ever come out of the prequels. But I like this right here. It says upload your high score through the Sega Dreamcast network.
Mm-hmm.
So you could put your high scores online from your console. And for people who are younger, they don't realize how mind-blowingly amazing that was to be able to do with a console in 99. I grabbed this one off the shelf because Retro Bliss played it recently on his channel, but Centipede.
Yeah.
There, we got that.
That's
Here's another one.
If I could say that, that's like a 3D.
Yeah.
If you've never played that, that's not a traditional Centipede game. That's like a 3D world where you go from one area of the world to the other, and you go like multiple like you might be high up on a plateau, and you might have to go down into a valley. It's kind of cool. I liked it. It was pretty cool.
Dr. Volk, when you first saw the Star Wars prequels, you were a small child, much like my children. You grew up with it, therefore you accept it. It's the same reason that people 10 years older than me hate Ewoks, but I'm okay with Ewoks because Return of the Jedi came out when I was 3 years old.
Same reason BCB likes Pac-Man.
The prequels almost killed my Star Wars fandom. And as bad as the sequels aren't great. I prefer them infinitely to the prequels because at least they look and feel right. Anyhow, Star Wars rant over. This is another one that I played on the Nintendo 64.
That's a Police album. That's not a game. No,
it is a great, great game. And I used to play it in the arcade a lot, but Gauntlet Legends.
Yeah.
I love Gauntlet Legends, and it is most definitely better on the Dreamcast.
Yes, that's the best port out of all of them, for sure.
Yeah. And this one's just for fun, and I'll save the only, believe it or not, as a homebrew channel, I only have one Dreamcast homebrew. I have to go down south to the States and rob Poe in order to do some more Dreamcast reviews. But it just like, come on, how could you not? Wacky Races.
Yeah.
And this is kind of a Mario Kart kind of game. These were pretty popular, especially after Mario Kart 64. I don't know if we can actually.
Hold on, I will. Give me a minute.
I want that one. I want Wacky Races. I love that cartoon.
Yeah, it's fun. It's kind of like a Diddy Kong Racing or a Mario Kart. But it's just the theming of it, because much like Mr. Postal, I've always loved Wacky Races. So those are the ones that I pulled out. They may not be the best, but especially those first two, Crazy Taxi and Hydro Thunder, they're the one. When I plug in the Dreamcast, I always have to play at least a round or two of each.
Mm-hmm.
It's prerequisite. They're my favorites.
Yeah.
You want to go next, Poe? What you got?
Yeah, it's not very many for me, just because, like I said, it wasn't really my thing back then. So when I started collecting again, unfortunately, I did most of my collecting through Video Games Monthly. So I put down on there, I have this system, send me what you got. And they did. And these aren't favorites. These are all still sealed that Video Games Monthly sent me. And mostly they are sports games.
Which is why they're still sealed.
Right. You have a roller coaster game, hockey, football, baseball, basketball, more football. And then they sent me two of these Choo Choo Rockets, and they're both still sealed. So I haven't even tried them yet.
Now, see, Choo Choo Rocket is a very, very good game. That was actually one of the ones I had set aside here.
Okay, I haven't tried it yet. They're both still sealed.
You can send me your extra one.
I'll give it to Bliss, and he can take it to you, so I don't have to pay prices to ship it out. But I was going to say the same, and this isn't in a good case at all. My jewel case is broke, but of course, Crazy Taxi. Another one I love just because I had it on PlayStation was Vigilante 8, Second Offense, and I love the first one too. But it's definitely more fun with friends sitting on the couch playing that game than it is now.
So funny. If you could, here, we'll pull you out of solo mode for a second.
Oh, sorry. We double clicked.
Let me. There we go.
I did.
I was going to also do Vigilante 8, Second Offense, But mine too is missing the front.
Right? Yeah, yeah. And that's how much the ones that I am playing. Sonic Adventure was on my list. You already mentioned that, and Soul Reaver, Legacy of Kain, are the ones that I've played the most. But again, I started collecting for it when I started collecting for the Saturn, the 32X, the Turbo Graphics. So money was real thin. I'm like, I got to figure out what I really want to collect here for and what I don't. So it kind of got put on the back burner for a while. But I do have my homebrews. I guess we'll talk about that later.
Yeah.
But yeah.
Okay. Yeah, so I'll try to grab ones here that weren't shown yet, just the ones that I remember being fun or really like. Obviously, and I agree with Mike, like Sonic Adventure, the first time playing it through was just like, yeah, is this really the Sonic I wanted, But again, they, obviously then they did a sequel, Sonic Adventure 2, and they did improve on it a lot, even more than that. And I do. Again, it took a little while, but I do appreciate both the games a lot, and I think they're definitely worth a play now. One that I liked, again, because it was kind of like an arcade racer, was Speed Devils. Like I thought that one was a good one. For
any arcade racer on the Dreamcast is good.
Yes, right.
I don't think there are any bad ones, and I've always preferred arcade racers to simulator.
Yep.
Games.
Oh, for sure. Any day, I'd rather have.
Right.
Yeah. Yeah. Give me some Need for Speed.
Yep.
Oh yeah.
Now, another one I really liked is Armada. Armada was really good.
Yep.
Trying to see how I explain it. It's kind of a RPG shooter per se, but it also kind of played like Bosconian. I would maybe be a good example. I would say. Maybe kind of.
It definitely has that flavor.
Yeah,
I'll give you that.
It's a flavor of that, but with role-playing RPG elements to it.
Cannabis Kid doesn't know what system we're talking about, but we all love 2600 homebrew games.
He has that problem sometimes.
but then obviously, this game was amazing. Phantasy Star Online. I mean, you
yes.
Oh yeah.
I mean,
I never played it at the time.
Yeah.
Well, that's the one. Aren't there still servers up today to play that?
So I believe there are private servers that people set up. Yeah.
Yeah, I think there's forums or places you can go, secret places.
Yeah, there is some private. Like I don't, because I've never done them, but like some people do have different servers for the Dreamcast to go play. So I think you got to do something with like a Raspberry Pi or something to kind of make a broadband adapter for it.
Yeah.
But yeah, I mean, there's probably like a whole 12 people playing it.
And not when you're playing. They're all in different hours.
Yeah, right.
Where's everybody at?
Derek, I do have a racing wheel. Mm-hmm. I have it. It works on my PS4 and my PC, but I don't have a PC that'll play any racing games right now. So,
Derek, go play some Bagman. Go play Bagman. We don't need to.
Yeah, actually, they did make a racing wheel for the Dreamcast.
Yep.
So, but then House of the Dead 2. I mean, that was.
How could you not? With the light gun, which I accidentally grabbed the wrong one. I grabbed my Mad Catz Saturn one, but.
Oh, Mad Catz.
Yeah. Pew pew.
These weren't that bad.
That looks intimidating.
But to Mike's point, what was big because I have that exact same one sitting over here in my tub is because it worked on PlayStation and Saturn. It was a dual light gun. So again, when you were cutting corners, it was the best thing to have. So this one I really enjoyed, Dynamite Cop. This was the sequel.
I don't think I played that one.
Oh, it's a great game. I highly recommend it. The original game was Die Hard in the arcade, Die Hard Arcade, which obviously was not called that originally. That was what it got rebranded over here. But this is the sequel, Dynamite Cop.
Okay. Derek, unless it's free, I can't.
But then Sega Bass Fishing was just cool, especially with the fishing controller.
That had to be fun. And I like fishing games.
Yeah. Marvel.
I had one of those for the PlayStation. Original PlayStation I had one of those controllers.
Fishing derby, let's go.
That controller was not exclusive to The Dreamcast, but the Dreamcast was the first time I ever
Yes.
experienced it.
I believe Sega was first to it, and then I think eventually you had some others. But yeah, then like I said, obviously Marvel vs. Capcom, and then it's
That right there is a valuable game. Don't be
Yeah.
flipping it around.
Yeah. This one, because again, this eventually came on a whole bunch of other stuff, but it was originally on the Dreamcast first, and that was Code Veronica.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
I remember that is one that I remember reading about in gaming magazines, and I'm like, I got to get a Dreamcast just for that game. I was such a huge Resident Evil fan back then.
Oh yeah. And then of course, you had Crazy Taxi, but then you also had Crazy Taxi 2, which again, great.
I have a bootleg copy of that. I don't have an original.
Another one I liked, it's kind of like a run and gun, is Expendable. I thought that was a good one for its time. Again, because you didn't have quote unquote, I mean, you had emulators on PCs and stuff, but it was just nice because you could get Sega Smash Pack that had 12 Genesis games on your Dreamcast. You know,
the Sega equivalent of Namco Museum.
Correct. And again, there was also some big import ones that never kind of got over here. I think one of these eventually did. But again, these were just fun to play with friends because they were arcade perfect. Was your Capcom versus SNK games. These were the Japanese imported versions. Because again, you could play imports on a Dreamcast if you had like a Game Shark. You put it in, open up the lid, put that down, and so forth. The last two I'll show, which are also imports, and again, they did not age well, but for their time, like I freaking loved them. And again, they're not great, but and that would be the two exclusive Godzilla games that were only available in Japan for the Dreamcast. So
I have never seen those.
Yeah.
Nice.
So this one is more of, I guess, a Godzilla simulator where you can play as Godzilla or Mecha Godzilla.
Well, that's cool.
And you actually storm, like the goal is to stomp through the city and destroy as much of the city in the time limit as you can. And just
how is that? You said they're not great games, but how could that not be flipping awesome?
Yeah. So just do a YouTube video search of Godzilla Generation. At the time, and again, I think a lot of people look at it to today's standards, because the thing is, if you played Godzilla on the PlayStation 4, which most Godzilla fans love that game, this really was the predecessor to that. And again, what suffered on this was just kind of bad camera angles because they wanted to try to make it feel like a movie as you were playing.
Wouldn't it be great if you had something here that could adjust your camera angle?
That was the problem.
Yeah.
Because again, what it would do is it wanted to, because again, since it was kind of a movie simulator of it, that as Godzilla is walking or whatever monster you're playing as, it would change the camera angles on you as you were moving around to try to have you like as you're watching a movie.
So you just wanted to destroy cities and things like that?
Yeah, that's
So
pretty much what you
nice.
did.
Like a rampage, only a sim, right?
Yeah,
You
right.
could beat the buildings and eat the people.
The only other way that you could destroy a city is to run for municipal office.
But then the sequel for it was more of an on rails. So it actually kind of did a formula similar to the Panzer Dragoon, where it was on rails, where you would have a cursor going around that you would highlight things and shoot at it. So
again, that sounds awesome.
Yeah, I'd love to play both of those actually.
No, I like them. I mean, obviously, why I still own them, but they're very cheap games, and the overall general consensus is people do not like those two games. But I do like them because I've always been a Godzilla fan. So like when I first saw this, I'm like, holy crap, I gotta import these. I mean, at the time, because this one was a launch title in Japan. So one of the 4 launch titles.
I like the cover art on this too.
Yeah,
yeah, they're awesome.
But when you think about what Godzilla games came out before the Dreamcast, because you had the NES ones, and then you had the Super Nintendo one, which I personally didn't care for the Super Nintendo one as much. But then from there, you kind of had a drought, right? I mean, I don't think there was any other Godzilla game until that. So, I mean, because then after this, you eventually had games on GameCube and PlayStation 2, but I think prior to those, it was just the Super Nintendo one, Super Godzilla, and then prior to that was Godzilla 1 and 2 on NES. So,
Yeah.
but yeah, so I think
Did we want
yeah, go ahead.
really quickly just touch on homebrew? Because I know I've got one here. I think Poe's got three.
As I said, I don't have any homebrews, so
I will.
Well, you do too, don't you, Mike?
I just have the one.
Oh, okay.
This was one that we actually talked about on a stream here.
Yeah.
When we had our interview with Michael Thomason. This is a very new homebrew. It come out in the last month or two. Flight of the Amazon Queen. It's from Good Deal Games. It is for purchase now if you want it, but it is a Dreamcast port of the point and click adventure, Flight of the Amazon Queen. And a lot of point and click adventures were really obtuse and they had really cheesy humor in them. This one has cheesy humor, but this is one of, like, I like it. If you like dad humor, you'll really like this. I like this game a lot.
Okay. What about you, Poe? You got some homebrews?
Yeah, I have Shadow Gangs, and I did play this on my channel a few years ago. And if you look closely at the bad guy on there, it's even easier to tell from the back.
Yeah, that's Queen. What's his name?
Freddie Mercury.
No, I forgot his name. Man, I should know better than you guys.
He's looking a little more like Freddie Jupiter back there.
Yeah, he's pretty buff. Look at him. But yeah, that's a fun game. It's a beat 'em up. Like I said, I love beat 'em ups. I got this from Waves, which most of these I did, which is over, Europe, I think it is. So, but this one, and then I got also got John Riggs, Yeah Beavis, which you can buy this for the NES.
Funny
also.
how that is this week's review.
Oh, nice.
The NES version.
Yeah, and that's pretty much. I ended up buying this from them and didn't even get it until like a few weeks before I actually met him at the Pittsburgh Gaming Expo, and he was selling this there, and I'm like, well, I can't buy that off of him. I just got it in the mail, But these two, I believe, are both also available on the Nintendo Switch if you have the Switch, so you don't have to buy them for your Dreamcast, but I did. Of course, I double dipped, I played them on there. And then Xenocider, this is really cool. It's like Space Harrier type of game, on-rail shooter. It's a really fun one. So yeah, I haven't done a video. I need, now that we're here and I'm showing these, I need to do videos on these to show
Especially
them. Especially
that Freddie Mercury one.
Yeah. I did do a video on that one. Like the rest of mine, I think maybe I was the only one that watched that video. So
I've watched ever since I've kind of discovered your channel. I've watched everything, but I haven't gone back and watched the entire history of Mr. Postile.
Yeah, those ones, like I said, you could get them from Wave from their website. They're being sent overseas. I don't think shipping was too bad on them though. And then Intrepid Izzy was the last one I got. And it's a puzzle platformer, also a very fun game. Unfortunately, like I said to you guys, until you talked about having me on, 3 of these games were still sealed. And I thought I'd better hurry up and throw these games in. I kept meaning to make videos on them, and life happened. So they've been sitting there with the shrink wrap still on them, But yeah, there's a lot of cool stuff. Well, every system now, right, has cool homebrews out there for it. But look it up. You'll find something you like. And the last thing that I have isn't a homebrew. This is my Hallmark ornament that I got last year.
Nice.
And I have all these so far from Hallmark. I got the NES one, SNES one, and the Genesis one. This one was last year's, and they have the original Xbox came out this year. But, I mean, they do a lot of cool work with them. So you have everything on here. You have your modem and everything.
That's the proper ports.
And if you hit the button, it plays Sonic Adventure, and the VMU even shows Sonic on it.
Wow.
Nice.
How cool is that?
Yeah, I always thought these things were neat. I absolutely love the NES one as my favorite one because you can actually open the toaster and see Super Mario Brothers in there and push down. You know, it's but yeah, the latest one is Hallmark has out right now is Xbox One, and it plays Halo whenever you turn. Well, it does the Xbox startup, which I love the sound of that. Yes,
Yeah,
and then it starts the music for Halo on it. So I'm gonna have to grab that one next.
That's cool.
nice. All
But
right.
I think the
Now
last
you got
thing,
some mod stuff.
yeah.
Okay, I'm having some difficulties here because you guys are kind of cutting in and out on the screen. So I don't know if I start cutting in and out. You need to let me know. Okay. So anyway, I'll go ahead. As far as mods go, I don't know how to mod, and the only one here that condones modding is Mike. So
What?
no, I'm kidding.
You know what?
Mike,
I have this power now.
Nice.
You get the co-pilot seat now.
I do. I deserve that. I deserve that.
Well, if you ever decide, if you haven't yet, and you do an Odyssey 2 video now that you have yours, I did some major modding to mine. That's before I knew Mike. I didn't know I was hurting anybody.
Oh! Don't do Poe. Put him back on. What kind of modding did you do to the Odyssey 2?
Well, I had the one that had the built-in controllers, so I put 9-pin ports on the front of mine and rewired them to use 2600 controllers on the thing. So yeah, there was a bit of Mike hates drilling, so I'll just say I dremeled it. Is that better?
I don't mind. I would like to specify. I don't mind mods. I don't like non-reversible mods. I don't like drilling holes into consoles. But at the end of the day, you do with your property what you want to do. It's
well, and I saved this one from the trash heap. A buddy I worked with, they were clearing out his uncle's house. The house was going to be demolished, and he's like, "There's some video game stuff there if you want it." And I said, "Well, yes, I do. I've wanted an Odyssey 2 for a while." So I saved it from dying anyway.
Yeah.
There you go.
Yep. You can do with it what you want then at that point. Okay, so, but my point being is that I don't know very much about, the person who really knows the most about modding, I believe, is Brian. But I did do a little bit of research, and I'm just going to very quickly brush over it. And Brian, or any of you guys, please jump in if you need to or want to at any point that I start talking. But one of the easiest things that you could do, if your console shell cracks or you have a problem with your console shell, you can replace it. So there's a website, stoneagegamer.com sells them, and you can also buy them on Amazon, different places. But
and AliExpress.
AliExpress, okay.
If you want to drill holes into a case, you can get one of these and drill holes in this, and I won't come to your house and beat you up.
Okay, but they come in different colors.
Well, Jolly Ranchers.
Yeah. Yep. So that there's an option if you need to replace that for that kind of a mod. Okay, and then let me get this. Okay, so this is really the only thing that I have as far as the website. As far as there, it's called the GDEMU mod. Okay, now what this is, where it basically replaces the optical drive with an SD card reader, where you load your games there, and it loads the games, and you can't use the optical drive, the GD ROM on the console any longer. Okay, and
that is for all disk-based systems. That is a weak point, and eventually these are going to be like absolutely required.
Yeah, and that's what Mike, I think he mentioned that earlier. Maybe he said that he would like that.
I did it in the green. I didn't. Oh. I did it in the green room. This is a mod that I don't mind because, again, it is reversible, and it is something that is going to preserve the life of the system.
Yeah, and something for folks to be aware too. As long as you're comfortable opening up your console, you can easily do this mod on your own. There's obviously folks that'll charge you to do it if you want it done. But I will say this particular mod is a solderless mod. So, I mean, it's literally taking out the old lens module and popping this in its place. So,
Yeah.
Just something to keep in mind, because I know a lot of folks aren't comfortable with soldering, but kind of like Game Boys and things like that, this is a solderless mod.
And for me,
I don't know why they named it after a goddamn emu, though.
I don't have a Dreamcast, and if at the getting of the consoles, that's not a hard thing to do. But getting the games, that's kind of an expensive proposition these days, and to play the games on a CRT television, if that's what you want to do, it's not so much a matter of collecting for me as much as it is being able to play them as they were originally intended to be played. And so for me, if that's what I want to do, this is something that I need to kind of sort of consider doing for me. You guys have been collecting for a while. I have not. So this is something that I'm kind of looking into. I don't know what I'm going to do. And then there are fan upgrades.
You do need a Dreamcast first, Phil.
I need what?
A Dreamcast.
I do need a Dreamcast first, absolutely. that would help. But like I said, those aren't necessarily hard to get. And then there are fan upgrades.
Yes, this was that fan mod I talked about, because again, the fan with the original Dreamcast is very loud, and this is a way to not make it sound like a jet engine's going off.
Yeah.
So.
Okay. And then
that's part of the appeal.
Apparently, there's a real-time clock battery upgrade, because I think the original battery clock is soldered in. I don't know if that's right. Yep.
And every time I need to do this, because every time I plug my Dreamcast in, I have to set the date.
Yes. So you can mod that to where you can actually change the battery out. And then the other part, there's a controller port fuse upgrade. So apparently the controller port fuses can...
So FYI, that's a common thing with a Dreamcast. Like, if someone says it doesn't work, not saying it's every time, but like if you can at least get them to say what doesn't work, and they're like, well, player 1 port or player 2 port don't work, this is what's wrong, because the fuses would constantly blow on those. I don't want to say constantly, but it was one of those things, like if you were plugging your controller in and out while the console was powered on, you had a good chance of blowing one of the fuses. And the
Dreamcast that I showed you in the thing, player 1 port does not work. I use player 2. You can play player 1 through the player 2 port. It's no problem. But this is another thing that I have to do with mine.
Yeah, but again, this is a solution to take care of that. And again, it's not hard to fix, but as long as you understand basic soldering, it's
not original anymore if you put a new fuse in it.
Yeah, but it works. And if I keep the blown one, it's reversible.
Oh yeah, right.
Booyah. Okay, and then there's the HDMI mod.
Yeah, what's the HDMI mod is you got to be very comfortable with soldering to do that one. So
yeah, and you can get S-video and SVGA out of this sucker. You don't need the HDMI.
See, for me, I wanted to be able to play it just as it was intended. So this is a mod I don't necessarily would consider.
Well, but here's the other thing with the HDMI. The problem is you're not going to play your light gun games.
And you can't.
Yeah,
you can't. And one last thing, you guys were talking about, Brian was talking about when the VMs were getting together and what would happen if they got together and had a baby. That was Mike was saying that.
I said nothing about a baby.
Somebody did.
I said when a boy VMU and a girl VMU love each other very much.
They get together.
Okay. Anyway, This
They
is
touch
what
tips and exchange save files.
okay. This is what happens. I'm going to show you what happens. You have a VM2, okay, or a VM Junior. I don't know. Anyway, I didn't really read up on this. There are videos on here about this, but basically, you put ROMs on this and you put them in the controller, and somehow it reads and plays the games there somehow. I don't know how.
I'm not familiar with this.
Yeah, I had never been. I don't know either. But anyway, but there it is. There may be something that needs to be done internally as well. I don't know.
Well, that's just the inside of the VMU showing the battery.
I know, but I'm just saying.
Oh, okay.
But yeah, I mean, and you can play with other people, and it has Wi-Fi connectivity and that kind of thing. So anyway,
well, look at you spending my money.
I would say that's pretty expensive. I mean, I guess if it can possibly, again, I gotta read up on that. I don't want to make an assumption here, but I guess if you're telling me you can load games from it, if it's an alternative to,
I somehow doubt.
But I'm not sure.
How would it
full
read?
Dreamcast
How would it
games.
read?
But
How would it actually
Well, the
read?
same way it reads. It's the same way it reads a save file. But the problem is, there's not enough internal memory to load an entire Dreamcast game. So, what games are you playing?
Right.
And do they require modification of your system?
And I mean,
Unless
US
there's a
dollars,
gigantic
that,
swap file or something.
Because I mean, that's 100. I mean, that'd be roughly $150, give or take, US dollar. I mean,
Yeah.
that better have some huge features for that expensive of a VMU.
Right. So
I like this comment. You're free to do what you want with your property, but remember, we're free to give you looks of judgment should you choose to do so.
All right,
Brian.
As far as mods go, that's all I got. There's only one other thing I want to mention. You guys is real quick emulation. I talked about the Redream emulator. I don't have links, but I will tell you, go online. There's a guy called I don't have it written down. ETA Prime, I think is his name. ETA Prime. On YouTube, okay? And he has a, not only will he tell you how to download the Redream emulator, he will tell you how to set it up for perfect graphics on your Windows system, okay? And I can't tell you where to get your games, okay? But it is a very good emulator for your PC. And I have to say, you guys didn't ask me what my favorite games were, even though I haven't.
You don't own any.
I play some.
It's certainly not the game you played today, Phil.
I didn't say it was, and you didn't give me a chance.
Okay, sorry, we'll give you a chance.
What's your favorite games?
Okay, I like Unreal Tournament.
Mm-hmm.
I liked Unreal Tournament. I like the Street Fighter series. I like all of those. Like the Street Fighter versus Capcom, the regular Street Fighter, Third Strike, all that. You know, all the different versions of that. Actually, the game that I played the day before that, even though I wasn't great at it, I thought it was kind of fun. It was called San Francisco Rush 2049.
Yep. I like San Francisco. Yeah, it's an arcade racer. I love all the arcade racers.
It was really good. And then I played Centipede. Now, I played a game today called Air Force Delta. And I played the first 3 levels pretty decent, I thought. But then the last level, I couldn't read the radar, and Mike was yelling at me on the chat. And so I was just
there's these green arrows that just go like pointing towards what you're pursuing, and the plane that you're supposed to shoot has a yellow box around it with red text saying TGT for target, and it's right there, and you're flying right past. You're like, what do I do?
He's telling me.
I missed it today. I missed. Well, I would replay, but
he's telling me, look at the
arrow.
arrow.
Screaming
there's
in the chat.
Different arrows.
Play some Vigilante 8.
It's okay.
Second
It's a
offense.
vigilante 8.
It's all right.
And the first thing you would do in that level is dive to the ground. In aerial combat, you want to be high into the rear.
I would depend on what level it was. I was out
That
when
level. And then that's why you kept missing the planes. They were over you.
Well, first of all, I was in the mountains. I couldn't get up very high anyway. As far as that, I had to kind of be low.
You start the level above the mountain, and the first thing you did was go down here.
You
But we
told
won't
me-
get
you
into
told-
that.
You told me. You told
Where
me,
did you learn to fly?
I yelled at you to stop diving. In aerial combat 101 is to be as high because that's your potential energy. I play a lot.
All right, let's not talk about how I played the game
Over
today.
one.
That's not what we're here for.
But no, I
So
know.
anyway-
Like Soul Calibur.
But my point being is,
yes, Soul
that
Calibur day one purchase. This was a September 9th, 99 purchase.
just because you don't have a Dreamcast does not mean you can't experience it. So anyway, we have been on for a
Yeah, we went over.
we
An
went
hour
over.
15. We're a little over. Yeah.
We're a tad over. So, but anyway, I thought it was interesting. I thought it was a good podcast. And Poe, I appreciate you being here and
Thanks for having me.
showing us your home brews and showing us your I like that ornament. That was sweet. I didn't know. I thought it was just an ornament, man. It had some functionality to it. You could almost mod that
show's
thing and
always the show's always a bit better with Mr. Postal on
It's
it.
always better with Mr. Postal, obviously. So anyway, so
That's not what the guys at the show say, but at least you guys say that. So
all right. So
Little
next week
Ghostbusters
we
in the
have
chat.
a podcast. Do we have next week's podcast for sure in line?
Yes, we do. He is booked and going to be on.
All right, tell us about it.
All right. Next week, we have world record pinball collection holder Rob Burke on the podcast. He will be talking about the Pinball Expo that's coming up in October. He'll be talking about Pastimes Arcade, which is in Girard, Ohio. And I have a video on my channel and 2 more videos coming about it. Basically, you got over 400 pinball machines and over 200 arcade machines, all on free play for $20 a day.
Mm-hmm.
You go there, you pay your $20. I would live there.
Yeah, kids are $10 too. So I mean, it's
and kids are $10. So
Nice.
worth the drive if you're anywhere near the east of Ohio. And he'll also obviously be talking about pinball and his history of collecting. He's got a huge arcade like that. Pastimes Arcade is from his collection. It is not only a public arcade, it is a curated collection. And so he'll be talking about collecting and his favorites, and it'll be a great episode. You'll want to be there for sure.
Absolutely. I'll probably be just listening and watching. Hopefully he'll be sharing some screens and things, or you'll have some pictures or something.
I have some pictures, and there's stuff that I could not put in my videos because we went to his house. He was very kind. He took us for dinner, and he took us to his basement, and his basement is bigger than most arcades.
Okay. All right. So, all right, guys, listen, for everybody who has watched from Mike's Gaming Gala, thanks for tuning in. And for everybody who's watching from Retro Bliss Gaming, thanks for tuning in. And so be sure to tune in next week. You don't want to miss the pinball episode. And so with that, we'll see you next week. Take care.
bye.
Bye.